Good morning. If you're watching this, this is World History 2, Unit 14. You're going to have two videos uploaded today, Unit 14, and then I'll stop this video and do another one for Unit 15. Couple housekeeping things before we get started on the actual lesson. Remember, SOL is next week for Unit 14. We're going to do the notes today. You got the test review today. Test will be tomorrow. Unit 15, there is no test. We're just going to run through the notes today. On Monday, we'll do Unit 16. There will not be a test for Unit 16. We're going to start SOL final review on Monday. We'll review Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. SOL will be next Friday. As soon as I have more information on that, I will let you guys know. Nationalism projects were due this morning. However, in the kindness of my heart, I will accept late ones. You will not get full credit. If you get it to me by tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, best you can get is an 80. If you get it to me by 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, best you can get 60. If I don't have it by 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, I'm not accepting it. It's going to be a 0. Because if I had a month and a half to do this, and I've already extended the deadline once, that's the best I can do. Get them turned in. So, let's get started here. Independence movements in the second half of the 20th century. Got a few people we know. This is Golda Meir. She is the Israeli Prime Minister in the fourth Israeli Prime Minister, if I remember correctly. We'll talk about her later on. This is Jomo Kenyatta, Mahatma Gandhi, Gamal Abdul Nasser, Nelson Mandela.
May I have your attention, please? Bus 71 just arrived. Please allow the students in your classroom. Again, Bus 71 just arrived.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, Indian independence movement is where we are starting. Okay, this is on the Indian subcontinent, and you have 4 countries that come out of India. You have India itself. You got Pakistan, which was formerly West Pakistan, Bangladesh, that was formerly East Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, which was formerly Ceylon. Okay, these were all controlled by the British. British came in control of India in the 1800s and ruled India until after World War II. The Indian National Congress was founded in 1885 with the goal of giving Indians more of a say in the government. However, they eventually changed this goal to wanting full independence from Britain. One factor that really weakened this movement was the issues between the Hindus and the Muslims within the movement. They each wanted their own nation. They each wanted complete control of the independence movement. You had the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, okay, who was known as Mahatma or the Great Soul. He didn't actively fight the British, okay? The way Mahatma Gandhi did it was civil disobedience and passive resistance. Basically, they broke laws that were unjust, but they didn't actively fight. Okay, passive resistance is like strikes, refusing to obey laws, refusing to pay taxes, boycotts, protests, things like that. They didn't attack British soldiers or burn down buildings or blow anything up. That's active resistance. This was passive resistance, okay? One of the examples of this was the Salt March that Mahatma Gandhi led in 1930, okay? Martin Luther King Jr. of the Civil Rights Movement used a lot of the same tactics that Mahatma Gandhi used. Okay, he learned from Gandhi how to protest and use civil disobedience. There's a political divide along Hindu-Muslim lines, and this led to the division of India and Pakistan. Okay, it's split in the 1930s with the formation of the Muslim League. So now there wasn't just one Indian independence movement. There were 2. One for Hindus, one for Muslims. After World War II, Britain gave India freedom, and then India divided between India and Pakistan, East and West Pakistan. There was a civil war in Pakistan that led to the split between East and West and the formation of the nation of Bangladesh. Mahatma Gandhi is killed, okay, He is killed by Hindu extremists because although he was Hindu, he was advocating for the Hindus and the Muslims to work together against the British, and the other members of the Indian National Congress didn't like that, and Mahatma was killed. Today, India is the world's largest democratic nation, okay? Not the United States, India, because they have more people. Does that make sense? They have a federal system that's the same kind of government we have, where they have a national government and state governments. Jawaharlal Nehru became the first prime minister of India. Okay, he named his daughter Indira after Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so Nehru named his daughter after his friend Gandhi. Does that make sense? Yes, no, yeah, okay. We talked about Indira Gandhi last week. He supported Western-style industrialization. He also supported the 1950 Constitution that sought to prohibit caste discrimination. This was basically racism. Okay? You were born into this caste and then you couldn't get out of it. Whether you were an untouchable, a priest, a warrior, a merchant, whatever. Ethnic and religious differences caused problems in the development of India. However, now they have new economic development that's helped ease the financial problems of the nation. India and Pakistan still fight today, though. They don't get along due to mainly a region called Kashmir. Okay? It's in northwestern India or eastern Pakistan. Both nations lay claim to this region. If there's a nuclear war, it's going to be between India and Pakistan. With the African independence movement, you have the right to self-determination. This was given by the United Nations. It was each nation had its own right to statehood and its own right to set up its government the way it wants to. Not the way the British say it has to, or the French, or whatever. Each nation gets to decide its own independence. There were both peaceful and violent revolutions after the World War II. You have pride in African cultures and heritage, and this led to the renaming of a bunch of countries. You have resentment of imperial rule. To this day, people in Africa still have this resentment towards Europeans because of all the colonial rule and what happened under that. You had the loss of colonies by Britain, France, Belgium, and Portugal. And you had the influence of the superpower rivalry during the Cold War. So, a couple different independence movements, starting with West Africa. Okay, this is peaceful. This is modern-day Ghana, led by Kwame Nkrumah. Okay? In Algeria, there was a bloody war for independence from the French. Okay, it was very violent conflict, left nearly 325,000 people dead. Okay, so Algeria was violent against the French. West Africa was peaceful, led by Kwame Nkrumah. In Kenya, there was a violent struggle against the British, led by Jomo Kenyatta. Don't get that wrong, guys. His name is Jomo Kenyatta, and the country is named Kenya after him. The guy's name's in the question, don't get it wrong. He supported the nationalist movement to demand independence from colonial rule, and he was jailed by the British for a presumed connection to the Mau Mau violence. The Mau Mau were basically a terrorist group, or the British saw them as a terrorist group. They led an uprising against the British from 1952 to 1960. Kenyatta then negotiated with the British for his country's independence. And after years of civil unrest and the scattering of indigenous tribes, Kenyatta worked for the return of land as well as economic and political rights for the people, and Kenya got its independence. Kenyatta first served as prime minister and then president, and Kenya became very prosperous and gained economic stability for a bit of time. However, Kenyatta led a one-party system and was very intolerant of anyone speaking up against him. Basically, you spoke out against Kenyatta, you went to jail. So, he did some good things, did some bad things. In South Africa, you have the Black South African struggle against apartheid, led by Nelson Mandela. Apartheid is literally the separation of the races. Okay? It is government-enforced racism. The African National Congress worked to end the apartheid system. Mandela was the prominent leader of this, He was jailed for 27 years. He was finally released by President F.W. de Klerk in 1990. De Klerk ended the apartheid system, and then South Africa held its first multinational, multiracial elections in 1994. Mandela won. He was elected president. First black president of South Africa. The effects of European imperialism can still be felt in Africa. You have Western culture gaining influence, colonies struggling to rule themselves once they gained independence, multiple conflicts, and then, like I said earlier, changed their name to reflect traditional cultures. Rhodesia became known as Zimbabwe. The Gold Coast became Ghana. Ivory Coast became Côte d'Ivoire. Just a bunch of different things where they changed from European names to traditional African names. In the Middle East, we talked about the Mandate system a few weeks ago. It was established after World War I, and then the ending of the Mandate system resulted in these Middle Eastern countries being free from Britain and France. In review, French mandates included Syria and Lebanon. British mandates were Jordan, Palestine, which later became Israel, and then Iraq. In Israel, it's one of the very few truly democratic nations in the Middle East. Land use for Israel came from a majority Muslim state. Okay? Israel has a different religion than most of the region. They are Jewish, whereas most of the region is Islamic. They're allowing the Western allies, mainly the United States, for support. Palestine loses territory to Israel when Israel is formed. And this has created conflict with bordering majority Muslim countries. Since Israel was created in 1948, they have been constantly in a state of war against their neighbors. Okay? Literally, there was an attack on Israel in 1948. Israel won. 6-Day War, Israel wins. Yom Kippur War, Israel wins. When Egypt surprise attacked them, Israel won. There hasn't been a war that Israel's lost. With one exception, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but that wasn't really an Israeli war. Things have changed in Israel recently. Recently enough that it's not on this slide. This is in the last couple months. With the Abraham Accords. These will eventually be in the SOL. The Abraham Accords are a peace agreement that normalizes relations between Israel and some of their Arab neighbors. It's unheard of. The members of the Abraham Accords right now are Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. There was one more. Who was it? Wasn't Saudi Arabia? For the life of me, I can't remember right now. Maybe Oman? I don't know. The big one's the UAE. Okay? So, Golda Meir was the 4th Prime Minister of Israel. She was Prime Minister during the Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur is a very holy day. Soldiers weren't on duty. Syria and Egypt launched a surprise attack, and Israel wipes the floor with them. Okay? After the war, Egypt and Israel agreed to settle their differences peacefully. They sought the support of the United States. Basically, this red line right here is where Israel was. After the Yom Kippur War, Israel took the entire Sinai Peninsula, which was Egyptian territory. They also took the Golan Heights from Syria. Gamal Abdel Nasser was the president of Egypt. Okay, he wanted to modernize Egypt, end Western dominization. He took over the Suez Canal. This caused the Suez Crisis. Britain, France, and Israel fought Egypt. This is the only time during the Cold War the United States and the Soviets were on the same side of a war. They both backed Egypt. So Britain, France, and Israel had to stand down. The reason I said Israel technically didn't lose this war is because it was a military victory for Britain, France, and Israel, but a political victory for Nasser in Egypt. He also built the Aswan High Dam with the help of the Soviet Union. This created 2 million acres of farmland that made year-round irrigation possible. And this was the Suez Crisis, which I just explained. Any questions with Unit 14? Yes, no? We good on 14? All right, guys, I'm going to end this one, and we'll start 15 in just a second.